Greetings, stackers. Welcome back. Sorry, it's been a little bit of time off. I had two crazy things. I had reconstructive shoulder surgery, and in the middle of that, I got COVID. So, apologies. Today, I wanted to take a moment, and I wanted. I think this fits with building on a lot of the. I only have one hand to motion and goof off with, but building on some of the topics that I've already talked about and addressed, trying to incorporate a little bit of it together in light of the political landscape coming out of the election here, but still very relevant. I want to take a moment and talk about tolerance, okay? But in typical BA fashion, I'm going to ramble a bit. So the first thing is, let's start at the golden rule, to the idea, the concept, hopefully you're familiar, but if you're not, to treat others as though you would want to be treated, to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So, and this is a common theme in most, if not all, world religions, okay? And if you look at the origin of religions, at least partially, as and establishing a system of values, and if you believe that values are important and have value by their definition, then you can understand why this is necessary and a good thing. Let's parallel this with, if you have, for anyone who has like children, think about the messages and lessons you teach your children. Do you want your child to be honest? Yes, I guess. I'll speak from from my perspective. I would teach my child to be a very upstanding citizen. To be honest, because dishonesty is wrong. Okay. So treating others. Would you steal from someone? No, because part of a good, and this is a great test, the reflection test, where if you inverted it, the analysis, how does it make you feel, or does it seem good? So you don't steal from somebody because you don't want to be stolen from. And if everyone adhered to that principle, theft would go away. Okay, cool. So we don't murder someone because we don't want to be murdered. And if I don't want to be murdered, I clearly can't go around sending a message that murdering people is the right thing to do. Right. So why is this important to understand? The key here is to see how there is a code and a criteria that we need to hold ourselves to, and acknowledge and be very wary of how often we break that code. Maybe not as individuals, although I would argue that we do break it way too often. Going back, game theory we've talked about, whereas we play the wrong game, short-term versus long-term goal planning, and not incorporating values as a society. This is where I think it's really important. Is we have these two sets of rules. We have how we would treat our child or our parents or our loved ones, something important to us, and then these rules that we take out into the world. Wait a minute, if you felt that being honest was the right thing to do, why are you playing by a second set of rules? And then unfortunately, this is where it gets really dangerous, is when you really analyze it, what you kind of see is there's a lot of reward for way too much, in my opinion, for not following some of those rules or bending those rules. An example. Let's say you have a silver tongue, okay? You're very charismatic. In effect, you're an amazing salesperson, okay? So if you bent the truth and lied to people, you would have more short-term money, okay? But that money actually can create opportunity. So let's say for 2 years before your reputation kind of went down, and I would argue that that's not actually what you see. When you think about the used car salesman adage, right? guess what? There's still salespeople at the car lots. So they didn't go away. The idea is that they're schmarmy and they're, talking you into them, and they convince you to get the extended warranty, and they're always, they're saying this is the best offer, but it's not the best offer. Yeah, but none of that has changed. And the reason is because they're successful. Because their job isn't to be honest, their job is to convince you to the point of making the sale. Okay, so if they are successful in doing that, they are rewarded both by the company, okay, and of course monetarily through their own actions. Why is this relevant? So you see how the wrong behavior is being actually motivated and enforced. But then, let's say in 2 years they were going to get fired because they got a bad reputation for slandering or lying, or basically they were disreputable. Okay, and I saw this a lot in the cell phone industry when I managed with Verizon, whereas people would you kind of had your steady performers who tried their best to be honest and whatever. Establish value is a good sales, a positive sales technique. But on the other side of that coin, you had people who were just all about, chasing the numbers, and a percentage of those people are just honest, great, salespeople, good people. But there's also the flip side of that coin. There's a bunch, too many in my opinion, that are manipulative, and they're chasing those bottom line results, but they're not doing it in honorable or honest ways. Okay, so back to the original. Should we be honorable? Should we be honest? Do these values matter? And I think there's this dichotomy that we want to keep thinking about, which is, well, how would you teach your child? And if your answer, if you start splitting it into two, like a fork, well, sometimes they should be honest, but out here in the other world, in the real world, they should be dishonest. Okay, why are there two sets of rules? And it's understanding that the paradox here that there are two sets of rules is a big part of the problem. Okay, so let's wrap this all back to tolerance. Okay, so in the political landscape, you see this. Well, let me start here. What is my position? I lean Democratic in concept, but as the Democratic Party keeps shifting more and more left and liberal, I find myself drifting more and more, centric, and I align. That says enough. But also, I think this idea that you would only ever have two opinions, a blue or a red opinion, is idiotic. Okay? Just like I might like pizza, you might not like pizza. There's more than two opinions. Okay? And this tribalism is dangerous. Okay? This idea that there's only two opinions is flat out wrong and stupid. Okay? There's, because really what it comes down to is problem solving. How would if I had an obstacle or a problem that needed to be solved, how should we approach it? There's more than two opinions, people. Okay? So you're being brainwashed from specific directive. Okay? So the blue team wants to win. In order to win, there are certain things that help them get ahead. Big part of that is convincing you to be on their team. So that's their goal. That's their objective. The red team does the same thing. Different tools sometimes. Actually, it's really different goals. But the tools are very, 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 very similar. And anyway, the point here is that this is not actually healthy or good or even real. Like, there's more than two opinions. And like, we'll use the pizza. I don't hate you if you don't like pizza. So why is it so important now all of a sudden that, oh, you don't like pizza, you're the devil? Like, no. And all that is branding. It's this tribalism branding that if I can get you to hate the other side, then I will confirm your vote for me and my team. Okay? All right. So, tolerance. If you're bringing up your child or your loved one, would you teach them to be tolerant? Tolerant of others. Tolerant of other things, of other opinions. And I think a good example, and it's relevant right now in the discussion, is we'll use race, okay? Would you teach your child to be tolerant of people of other races? Or would you teach them to be intolerant, which kind of is the definition of racism? Would you teach them to be racist? Okay? I'm not talking about some of the observed behaviors, by the way. I'm talking about your teaching. Would you want them, your child in this example, to be tolerant? Would you teach them to be tolerant? And I hope the answer is yes. And I think, at least conceptually, most of us would say yes. Whether we adhere to that truth and actually follow through and train our children is not the same thing, but establishing the goal, the desired outcome, is the first step. So I'm not going to spend too much time muddying that water, but okay, so tolerance is good. Well, do you understand that when you criticize someone else's opinion, you're not being tolerant of their opinion? Okay, we talked about a little of this in the opinion segment, okay? Well, why is that so important to understand? Because that's at the core here of so many of these problems. Great example right now that we're seeing, this is being driven from the far, far left, but is this cancer culture. And immediately there's this divide. There's people who have seen it or have had it happen to them. Gina from The Mandalorian is the Karana, I think your last name is the newest, right? You know, she said completely, in my opinion, non-abrasive. Nothing she'd said was wrong, and she got canceled for it. Now, there may have been some behind-the-scenes stuff we're not aware of, but the stuff that she set out on her social media was not confrontational at all, and it should never have led to anyone being canceled, okay? So the first problem is, why are we canceling people? We just agreed that tolerance is a good thing, that intolerance is actually racism or discrimination. Okay, so when we're intolerant, we're discriminating. So why are we not being more tolerant? And that seems to be the agenda being presented, that we should be tolerant, you know, like tolerant, you know, of the LGBT community, you know, right on that line, you know, political affiliation. Okay, but that's not actually what we're seeing, and it's not what the system seems to be promoting and rewarding. So now back to the Gina. So somebody gets canceled, and what you really kind of have is you have people who are like, their opinion is so right and so strong that cancel is the right way to go. That's not tolerant. So I would argue that you're wrong. But then you go a little further and you get the people who've seen it happen, and they're fearful. They're afraid. They don't want to be canceled. So now their opinion is being silenced. Well, that's not tolerance. That's wrong. Then you've got the people who kind of don't think it exists. And to be honest with you, like everything, there's a sliding gradient scale. Like maybe, you know, some of it is overblown. But the second you're canceled, it existed for you. And if you create a culture that is canceling people, then it's a matter of time before you get canceled. Okay? Wow, that's not good, and it's not tolerant. We all make mistakes, okay? We all screw up from time to time. We all misspeak. We all, I mean, if anyone who's been through college remembers that drunken night, or doesn't remember it maybe, like, come on. Like, this is just idiotic. So now let me kind of, you know, push a little here. So tolerance. We want to be tolerant. And here's another important component of this tolerance. Still kind of using that political backdrop, is it's really very important for people to understand that you do not want to censor anything but freedom of speech. And it's not that you don't want to think that hateful or hurtful speech might be considered morally wrong. It's that, and this is the part not enough people talk about, that the cost of giving it up is way too extreme. Okay? So when you give up freedom of speech, through censorship, okay, the cost is too high. Because think about it, because what ends up happening is we think in terms of, I don't like what they're saying, but we never put it through that mirror. That's why I started with the golden rule, and go, well, what if they didn't like what I was saying? What if I wasn't allowed to talk? What if I got canceled? Do I want to go around canceling people? No, because I don't want to be canceled. Well, then stop canceling people, okay? Just like I wouldn't murder somebody, okay? Because when you ruin their life, you can make an argument that might be worse than murder, okay? So, bringing it back around. So censorship, I do believe that it should not, freedom of speech should be preserved, and censorship is wrong. It gets a little bit dicey when you have a privatized company, something like a Facebook. Like, they're private. They're actually allowed to censor, and our freedom is not to use Facebook, okay? But in general, that censorship is really dangerous, and it creates this dichotomy that cannot be sustained. It promotes that cancel culture, and then all of a sudden, once you said it's okay to cancel people, the line becomes, you see this, you really have to kind of understand this and be almost a historian, but regulation almost never goes backwards. It always goes forwards. So you get more and more and more and more regulation, okay? So if we insert cancel, we get more and more and more and more and more cancellation, okay? Because it never goes backwards, or very, very, very rarely. It's usually when a government falls and then you recreate something is when you see those big steps. Okay, so now let's look at the politics. So you've got red and blue both have this really twisted agenda, and there's parts of their agendas that might make sense. It might make a lot of sense because they have to. If they don't make sense, they're not going to get people motivation behind them. But then you look at the divide, and it's all basically sales and marketing, How do I convince people that the other people are bad? So that why? Why would I want them to be bad? So that you vote for me, not the other person. Yeah, but that's extremely destructive, okay? And it's not tolerant, okay? Even I do think, so here's like a real relevant one. I think Biden has abused a little bit the word unity in his first 10 days. But I also think that's the right message. So even though he might be using it for a portion of his motivation might not align. Okay, what's the other message? What would be the opposite of that message? Divide. Like, come on, like, grow up. Maybe he is abusing it, because I do think he's used it an awful lot. But what is the counter of that argument? So when I see these people are like, he's stupid, like, this has nothing to do with whether, because I don't agree with some of the things he's already done, but holy cow, like, how can you make an argument that your family should be divided? Like, you're just not thinking, man. We gotta stop stacking the stupid, man. Okay, let's see. I covered a lot here on the concept of tolerance, but we need to be tolerant of other people's opinions, of other people's positions. Understand that for most of us, there's real reasons we think the way we do, and if somebody else doesn't align with me, even if I don't agree with their position, their history and journey has real reasons that they think that way, and for them it makes sense. Maybe it's fear, okay, maybe it's exposure, who knows. But these differences, maybe it's exposure in the form of like media, like news, information. So whatever's causing it, we have a way more in common than we do not in common. And I'm going to keep doing this. If you go back to how would you treat your family and how does your family operate? And would you want your friends circle to work the same way? And the answer is yeah, maybe not to the same degree, but yeah. Well, if you could do it, wouldn't you? Yeah, I would. Yeah, sure I would. But it's just, it's harder because you got more people, more personalities, more moving parts. Okay, yeah, so it's harder, but it's a good goal. So why don't we keep that in focus? That let's keep treating people with respect. Let's be tolerant of positions that don't align with what we want to hear. Let's understand that if you're throwing a rock and you don't want to be hit by a rock, stop throwing rocks, okay? Stop canceling people. It's stupid. It's hurtful. It's destructive, okay? And you don't want them to I mean, the whole point of cancel culture is, well, they were doing something wrong. And I'm not saying we ignore that, but the cancellation, just, do you want to be canceled? No, then why did you cancel somebody else? It's that simple. All right, so let's try and be a little bit more tolerant. Let's try and be a little bit more thick-skinned. Let's meet in the middle and discuss ideas. And what you're really going to find is that we have different goals. And it's those different goals that are priorities, might be a better way to say it. Your priorities set your goals. That's what's creating the divergence in motivation and behavior, is that, well, I think A, B, and C are my priorities in order, and your C, A, B. Well, of course we don't have the same approach and the same, say I only have one hand. This is very restrictive. Of course we don't have the same answer. We have different priorities, okay? So then the question is, well, reoccurring themes, create clearly defined goals that benefit America, the U.S., or the global world as we know it, and move forward. All right, I think that's enough rambling for now. So that's my take on tolerance. Be more tolerant. Stop stop censoring people, at least legislatively. That's not the right thing to do. And involve yourselves in more debates, discussions, where you're learning, why people who don't align with you think the way they do. And hopefully if they're doing the same back, then you're creating a moment of learning and respect and love. So, all right. Thank you guys for tuning in. Please feel free to subscribe, smash the like, all that stuff. And the biggest thing is, if you like my content, talk to a friend, get a friend to watch it, and all that. Great. See you guys soon.